You know what's wild? I was sitting in my car last Tuesday looking at my bank account on my phone, and I had $247 to my name. Not $247 in savings, $247 total. And I was making $45,000 a year at that point. I remember thinking, I'm doing everything right. I went to college, I have a job, I show up on time. Why am I still broke? And here's the thing, I wasn't alone. According to a 2023 Federal Reserve study, 37% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing money or selling something. That's not a small number. That's more than 1 in 3 people living on the absolute edge. My name is Oric, and I spend way too much time thinking about why smart, hard-working people stay broke while others seem to effortlessly build wealth. If you're someone who feels like you're doing everything society told you to do, but you're still living paycheck to paycheck, wondering when things are finally going to click, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Look, I'm going to share with you the exact skills that took me from that $247 in my bank account to doubling my income in 18 months. And no, this isn't about some crypto scheme or drop shipping course. This is about fundamental skills that changed how I think about and generate money. But here's what most people don't realize. The skills that keep you employed are not the same skills that make you wealthy. Let me explain what I mean. When I was making $45,000 a year, I was really good at my job. I showed up, I did what I was told, I met deadlines. Those are employee skills. They're valuable, don't get me wrong, but they have a ceiling. Your boss has a budget. Your company has a salary range. You can be the best employee in the world and still max out at whatever that range is. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the average raise in America is 3% per year. So if you're making $50,000, you're looking at an extra $1,500 a year. That's $125 a month. That doesn't change your life. Here's the first skill that changed everything for me. I learned to sell without selling. Now you might be thinking, Oric, I'm not a salesperson. I don't want to be pushy. Neither did I. But here's what I discovered. Every single interaction you have where you want something from someone else is sales. When you asked for your job, that was sales. When you negotiate your salary, that's sales. When you convince your spouse where to go for dinner, that's sales. We're all selling all the time, we just don't call it that. I started studying how to communicate value, not features, value. And this is where it gets really interesting. Most people, when they ask for a raise or pitch themselves, they talk about what they do. I manage the social media accounts, I create reports, I handle customer service. That's a feature list. Nobody cares. What changed my income was learning to talk about outcomes. I increased customer retention by 23%, which generated an additional $67,000 in revenue for the company last quarter. See the difference? I remember the first time I tried this. I was terrified. I scheduled a meeting with my boss, and I had spent 3 hours the night before calculating the actual dollar value I'd created for the company. I showed her that my work had directly resulted in $180,000 in new contracts over 6 months. I wasn't asking for a favor. I was showing her it was bad business not to pay me more. I got a $12,000 raise, not 3%, not $1,500, $12,000. That's what happens when you learn to communicate value instead of just describing tasks. But here's the thing, that raise wasn't the real win. The real win was the mindset shift. I stopped seeing myself as someone who traded hours for dollars and started seeing myself as someone who created measurable value. That's the psychological shift that nobody talks about. According to research from Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck, people with a growth mindset, people who believe their abilities can be developed, earn significantly more over their lifetime than people with a fixed mindset. It's not just about working harder, it's about believing you can learn skills that create more value. The second skill is what I call strategic learning. And look, I'm not talking about going back to school for another degree. A Georgetown University study found that 43% of college graduates are underemployed in their first job, working positions that don't require a degree. More education doesn't automatically equal more income. Strategic learning means identifying the specific skills that have the highest financial return and ruthlessly prioritizing those. Here's what I did. I looked at people making twice what I was making, and I asked myself, what can they do that I can't? I wasn't looking at their job titles or their degrees, I was looking at their actual skills.
And I noticed patterns. They could all analyze data and communicate insights. They could all manage projects and coordinate teams. They could all write persuasively. These aren't mysterious talents, they're learnable skills. So I invested in myself. And here's where people mess up. They think investing in yourself means spending a bunch of money on courses and certifications. Sometimes, sure, but I spent maybe $400 total. I took a $50 course on Excel and learned how to do pivot tables, VLOOKUPs, and basic data visualization. Boring, right? Wrong. That skill alone helped me get my next job, which paid $68,000. I spent 3 months doing free work for a local nonprofit managing their fundraising campaign. I learned project management, stakeholder communication, and how to work under pressure. I put that on my resume. Next job paid $75,000. Now you might be thinking, Auric, I don't have time for this. I'm already working 50 hours a week. I get it. I was there. But here's the math that changed my perspective. If you spend 5 hours a week for 6 months learning a skill that increases your income by just $10,000 a year, that's 130 hours of learning for an extra $10,000 annually. That's $76.92 per hour of learning. Show me an investment with a better return than that. The third skill, and this one's going to sound simple, but it's devastatingly powerful, is building leverage. Here's what most people don't realize about wealth. Wealthy people don't work harder, they work with leverage. What's leverage? It's getting more output from the same input. Let me give you a concrete example. When I was making $45,000 a year, I was trading my time directly for money. I worked 40 hours, I got paid for 40 hours. My income was capped by the number of hours I could physically work. But then I started creating assets. I built a spreadsheet template that automated a report that used to take me 3 hours every week. I taught my process to 2 other people in my department. Suddenly, my manager saw me as someone who didn't just do work, I was someone who multiplied the team's effectiveness. That's when I started getting pulled into higher-level conversations, strategic planning meetings, client presentations, and here's what's crazy. Those meetings paid the same as when I was doing grunt work in my cubicle, but they were visible to people who made hiring and promotion decisions. Within 8 months, I got offered a role that paid $92,000, not because I worked harder, because I created leverage. But the real leverage came when I started building skills that could generate income outside my job. And look, I'm not saying quit your job and start a business. I'm saying develop skills that have value beyond your current employer. I learned basic graphic design using free YouTube tutorials, started doing logo work for friends' small businesses for $200 to $300 each. That's not life-changing money, but here's what it did for my psychology. It proved to me that I could create money from skills, not from a boss, not from a job, from skills I learned. According to a 2024 Bankrate survey, 39% of Americans have a side hustle. But here's what they don't tell you. Most side hustles are just getting a second job, driving for Uber, doing food delivery. That's still trading hours for dollars. The side hustles that actually build wealth are the ones where you're developing skills that compound. You learn video editing, every video you edit makes you better, your rate goes up, you work with bigger clients, you build a portfolio. That's leverage. The fourth skill is financial literacy, but not the boring kind, not balancing a checkbook or making a budget. I mean understanding how money actually works in the economy. Here's what changed for me. I stopped thinking about my income as a fixed number and started thinking about it as a variable I could influence. Let me give you an example. Most people think a 401k match is free money. And it is, kind of. But here's what I realized. If your company matches 4% and you're making $50,000, that's $2,000 a year. Amazing. But if you take that same level of strategic thinking and apply it to increasing your income by $20,000, you just gave yourself a raise of $20,000, plus now your 4% match is worth $2,800 instead of $2,000. You just created an extra $20,800 in annual value. See how this compounds? I started reading everything I could about tax strategy, not to avoid taxes, but to understand the game. Did you know that the U.S. tax code has different rates for different types of income? W-2 income, the kind most people earn, is taxed the highest. Capital gains, business income, these are often taxed at lower rates. I'm not saying quit your job. I'm saying understand the rules of the game so you can play it better. Here's the thing that nobody wants to hear. The system is designed to keep you comfortable enough that you don't leave, but not wealthy enough that you have options. The average American will spend 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime. 90,000 hours. And most people will end that journey with a small 401k, a mortgage that took 30 years to pay off, and regret about the risks they didn't take. Look, I'm not here to depress you. I'm here to tell you that skills are the great equalizer. You can't control where you were born, who your parents were, what opportunities you had growing up, but you can control what you learn. You can control how you communicate your value. You can control whether you build leverage or just trade time for money. Here's what I want you to do after watching this video. Pick one skill, just one, not 3, not 5, one skill that you can learn in the next 90 days that would make you more valuable. Maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's basic coding, maybe it's financial modeling in Excel. Whatever it is, commit 3 hours a week to learning it. That's it, 3 hours a week for 90 days. And here's why this works. It's not just about the skill. It's about proving to yourself that you can change your circumstances, that you're not stuck, that your income isn't a